Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Nomad podcast with me, Danny Abbey, Lee Munnigan, and today we have a special guest. We have Jordi Sullivan from the Fight Dietitian. He works closely with probably the biggest names in the UFC.
Particularly over this end, in Australasia.
Yeah, we have Alexander Volkanovski, Featherweight Champ. We have Izzy Stolbander.
Israel
Adesanya. We work with, if you don't know them, you're not a UFC
Dan
fan.
Hooker.
Dan Hooker.
Some big names.
All our city kickboxing. So thanks very much for coming on today.
Yeah, no, cheers, boys. Thanks for having us on.
Before we get into all the Fight Dietitian stuff, this is our first podcast since this COVID-19 kicked in.
Yeah, it's been
pretty
crazy, pretty surreal.
Pretty mental. I think it's like nobody expected
to
have this much time off. I remember at the first one, everyone was like, "Oh yeah, it's a bit dodgy, and this would be grand." I thought it was going to be like Ebola. Remember that kind of kicked off?
Yeah, it kind of didn't really go anywhere.
Nah, it just kind of they stopped it. But man, the world's mental at the minute.
It's crazy, isn't it? Yeah, it's good to be back, but it's good to start back. I feel as though we're getting back to normal a little bit quicker than what maybe the UK is, and
I think we're in the best place in the world.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Out of everywhere,
and the best place in Australia.
Well,
Queensland,
as well. So we've been pretty lucky, but we're all kind of getting back to work. The restrictions are getting lifted, and it seems to be getting back to a bit of normality. Not over in the UK and all, but over here we've all been lucky. So have you been affected by it badly, or not too bad, or?
Yes and no, bro. Like it's just like a different type of pace. I think client-wise, like we don't have fights, so I'm not in like a fight camp prep with anyone. Yeah. But in saying that, like I just came off a pretty crazy like start to the year. We had Volk fighting for the title in December, and then pretty much went straight through until March where Israel fought.
He was the last card before it kicked off.
It was funny because when I was going back and forth to New Zealand a lot, and I kind of saw each time I went to the airport how it changed with how everything was developing. I remember like the first time I saw a sign for it, and it was like, okay, like that's something we should probably look out for. And the next time was make sure you're wearing your mask, make sure you're sanitizing. Yeah. And then I remember when I went to Vegas with Israel at the start of March, and it was like there was a different feeling in the airports, like it was tense. And I remember I had to come back a day earlier. I actually had to leave before Izzy's fight, and then got back. And I remember I got through and went through, and then all the boys who came back from New Zealand all had to quarantine for 14 days. Yeah, so I missed all that by one day, but it went from, in the space of that 7-day period, 0 to 100 real fast. But in terms of work-wise, like obviously not in fight camp, but we had a lot of things that we had planning. Like we've got online courses that we do, all those things that you kind of do at nighttime after you do your proper day's work. It's kind of just filtered back into like the 9 to 5 stuff. So still keeping busy.
One thing I've noticed, I reckon, the way this has all happened, so people are doing Zoom calls and conferences and meeting people, I reckon a lot of jobs aren't going to be brought back, and businesses are going to realise, look, we have 100 people here. We don't need this many people anymore. We'll cut everything. So it's bad. It's good for businesses in some way because they're going to realise we have a lot of wasted people here that we don't even use. I've been speaking to a few people, and they've been like, we've cut 50 people and they're not going to be back because we don't need them. We've realised the budget didn't, at the minute, like we're still making as much money, but we're making enough to cover everything, and there's a lot of dead weight, so it's kind of bad in that way. I reckon the world will 100% change. Yeah,
there's definitely a lot of economic sort of pressure on the world there now, and talk of even like a global depression on the horizon, especially with the amount of unemployment all over the world and in the scenario we're in. But yeah,
have you heard all the conspiracies about like China actually did like?
Yeah, yes and no. I try to stay out of it.
Yeah, so do I. You listen to when
it's a bit of a rabbit hole, isn't it? Once you go down that one.
So I was really bad with it because I broke my talus in my foot.
Right.
So literally the week everything shut down, I was off work for 3 weeks, sitting at home, watching everything, watching this podcast, this one, and everyone's saying fucking conspiracies, China's after placing this out there, and they're trying to fuck Trump up and all, and I was getting paranoid. Like I was like fucking really, really sus about it. And then I was just like, right, stop watching the news. If anything massive happens, you'll hear about it. And I think that's the best way to go about it, because you start listening to too many conspiracies and you start thinking mad stuff.
Yeah, big time, bro. I have like a real policy. Yeah, it's like a social media policy. It's like anything on your feed. Maybe it's just secondary to running a business where it's like a competitive environment. But it's like if you look at something and it like works you up, or you're not getting like a positive emotion, I just flick it, like I block it, or just put. You just don't need it, right? Same with all that stuff.
No negativity crap. You don't need any of it. Just
So Jordi, tell us a little bit about yourself, mate. Tell some of the listeners, a little bit of background, and I guess where you're from and how it come to what you do.
Yeah. So I was born and raised in Brizzy here. So went to school here and then did my university studies here. So I did my undergrad in exercise nutrition science over at UQ. And I was silly enough to go back there straight after and do a master's. So did a master's of dietetics. And I guess in terms of the Fight Dietitian, like I grew up playing rugby. I think like most people in Brizzy grew up playing rugby in terms of like combat sports.
League or union?
Union. I was one of those private schoolboys. So well, our whole life was revolved around rugby, right? But I used to box on my off seasons. That's how I got really into boxing. But I don't know if it was just where I grew up, but I didn't even know what like jiu-jitsu was and wrestling. We just weren't exposed to it. But I remember getting into uni and just really like when I found out, probably first year, like I was really, really into the UFC, and then just like kind of got obsessed with it and kept going through. But all through my university career, I actually like wanted to do med school. I wanted to go and be a doctor. So in my mind, dietetics was a bit of and it sounds bad, like a second tier thing in my. So I like always did this extra study, and I did like extra anatomy classes and extra like endocrinology classes and physiology, which in hindsight, in 2020 vision, it was very, very handy for what I do now. But at the time, like I never really wanted to pursue it. But I just could never get past that med school exam. So I ended up finishing my degree, and I was like in this weird spot where I was like, okay, like there's obviously no jobs in combat sports. Like you search combat sports dietitian on Seek, nothing pops up. So I ended up going over to Canada. My older brother lived in Canada. So I ended up doing a gap year over there, which turned into about 3 years.
Whereabouts in Canada?
So I started in Toronto and then ended up on the West Coast, ended up in Vancouver, ended up in a sleepy little mountain town up in Jasper. That was a really cool experience because, especially for the Fight Dietitian, because over in North America, that MMA scene is huge. And it's massive, and that was kind of like my first exposure to it.
That's where St. Pierre trains. Did you get anywhere near him?
Yeah, Montreal, up there. So I spent like a bit of time up there. But like that's when all those guys are massive, and every MMA gym that you went to. And that's when I started like training a lot more seriously too. Start jiu-jitsu over there, and like I was just boxing to stay. I was actually teaching boxing classes. I was so broke. Like I needed to make like effort. And it was just like a natural progression of it all. And then when I was over there, like naturally that's when like Connor was like coming up and all these big guys. And then there was a few teams around, like Mike Dolce's always been a big guy, and then like George Lockhart came through, and he ended up running like certification class, ended up shooting down to LA and like meeting him and his team. And when I came back to Australia, I kind of had this idea in my mind where I was like, I've seen how these other guys have done it. Like I've seen how Dolce and I've seen how, George and his team do it. And then like the UFC is getting so big in Australia, and I realized like this is such a huge problem here. Like, why don't I do it? Like, why don't
you be the first guy to get going?
And it's like I thought about it for so long, hey, and it's like I still worked at a sports clinic and I had a job at the hospital at the time, and I was kind of teetering, but I do like there was a very specific point in time when I was like, F it, I'm just going to go for it because I can see how it's worked in North America and how it's done there. So, yeah, just kind of ended up pulling the trigger and jumped off the cliff.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, like I see it a lot in coaching, where probably before you come along with like your science background, that coaches and things will always continue to be done the way they were always done. Like I mean, coaches will do what was done to them, and then so on and so forth. And often you'll probably find that there's no evolution in what's happening. Things are probably getting done today, just like they were 50 plus years ago. And it's really good to see, and I guess refreshing probably to have someone like you come along from a science background and put, I guess, method to some of the madness. And have you seen many of before you've came in or before you've came into many different camps? Have you seen some really interesting things happen with?
For sure. That's just like a thing. I think I've gone past the stage where it's like you blame the coach. It's not the coach's fault. Yeah. Like the thing is that you don't know what you don't know. Like back when they were doing it, especially if we talk about like making weight and the nutrition side of it, they're just doing what their coach told them. And like I'm kind of spoiled in the position that I'm in because especially in the last like 10 years, I think 2011, I would say the first real good piece of science came out. It was a paper by Dr. James Morton over in Liverpool, John Moores. And it's called How to Make Weight in Combat Sports. And that's kind of like the golden framework that we as practitioners use. But before that time, that didn't exist, right?
It's mad the way 2011. That's not like
it's crazy,
less
isn't
than 10, like 9 years ago.
And you think like the UFC started in what, like 93?
Yeah.
So how long was that going before that came out? And all those guys were cutting weight back then.
It's really interesting to see that that it's taken that long for somebody somewhere to really do some research into this and see, I guess, to provide a framework, you know. Yeah.
So when you were coming up, right? So, who is like every sport, every trade? There's the OG, there's someone everyone looks up to. Who is there? Like your people would obviously be looking up to you now in Australia. But who were the main guys that you were like, look, these guys know what they're doing? I'd learn a lot off these guys.
Yeah, I remember reading that paper by Dr. Carl and Dr. James. Like that was 2011. So I think I would have been like first year university. So I think I came across that one. Clint Wattenberg has always been like a big idol of mine. The guy who runs the he's head
in
of
China, is he?
No, so Clint runs he's head of performance nutrition at the UFC in Las Vegas. So Dr. Reed Real is the guy who runs China. And Reed, when I was kind of doing my masters, he was completing his water loading study, which is like a groundbreaking study at the Australian Institute of Sport. Reed was actually a guy that when I graduated, I really wanted to tag and get close to. And as soon as I graduated my masters, he effed off and went to Florida. And I was like, man, what the hell? But yeah, guys like Clint Wattenberg, Dr. Carl Langan-Evans, like Reed Real, they were the guys. And Clint at the time was working at Cornell, and he wrote, I remember this book, Performance Nutrition for Wrestlers. It was one of the first books that I read that talked about all of this. And I was like, holy smokes, like this is actually a thing that people do. And I remember like my first ever assignment at university was just like to get used to researching or something. And I remember I just watched this, remember that show, I think it was like Jimmy Smith, the Bellator commentator?
Yeah.
Him and his boy like went around the world and they'd like try all these combat sports. I remember watching him do like a sambo or something, like whatever that French kicking combat sport is, whatever that is. And I remember my first university assignment, I was like, I'm going to look at the research about like effective kicking. And then there's like nothing. There's like just like not that much anything. But that's when I like kind of found like Clint's book and you know, Dr. Carl and James's work. But yeah, other than that, man, at that time, there wasn't a whole lot. There was like, even now, there's not a whole lot of people doing this.
I guess like I'm gonna ask a question that's something I get asked a lot. Like, do you have like a philosophy, or I guess like a nutrition philosophy that you stand by, that you advocate for? I guess all your, not just your athletes, clients, everybody. Like, do you have like a guidance set of principles that you follow, type of thing? Does that make sense? Or
yes and no. Like I have like a personal philosophy in my practice is like I always say to myself, like, I know enough to know that I don't know enough.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I personally like am in a very fortunate position where I can talk to like a lot of researchers, and I have like quite a good client list and have a lot of clients I can work with where I can talk to a lot of researchers who want to get their voice out there and get their research out, and they can talk to me and I can put that into action with my clients. So like my philosophies about nutrition are always changing. Like, and it's like my clients will all tell you, like guys like Kai Kara France from City Kickboxing, we've done like 5 or 6 camps. Every single camp looks different because I'll talk to someone or I'll read something and I'll be like, oh man, like
let's try this.
That looks awesome. Like, let's try this. And then he's like, no man, like last time was fine. Like we got weight there. I felt good. It's like, no man, like we could probably do this better. There's probably something like little bit 1% that we could get better. So it's like, in terms of like, I'm not too sure like where I stand with it because I'd say
still learning.
Exactly. And there's like, we're in such a good time right now where like I run a podcast like you guys where I talk to researchers, and I do it once every 2 months. And I never struggle to get 10 to 15 guests of new researchers who are bringing out new research and talk to. So it's just like this really cool time right now where there's a lot of peak interest. Like the UFC is like really brought interest up. And luckily, like all these, like even the old school coaches are kind of realizing that. And there's guys like me who are super interested and they've got eyes on this and they're going, hey, look, I want to study this and do that. And I think what we're seeing right now in MMA is because that the interest in sports science is going up, you're also seeing the application of that sports science, and you're seeing the evolution of MMA. You're kind of seeing MMA go through like what rugby league or rugby union or soccer went back maybe 20 years ago. And I always say, like, think of like a rugby union or a rugby league player in the 80s and then compare it to now. It's chalk and cheese, right?
Completely different.
It's crazy.
Because I listened to one of your podcasts and you were talking, I think it was an Irish guy about sleep.
Oh, Ian Dunnigan, Dr. Ian Dunnigan. Yeah,
And
yeah.
I was yesterday on a cycle and I was listening to it, and like even that alone, you can just go into so much detail on just sleep. So like there was not many people years ago talking about you should get this. Like he had it down to this is what you should do. This is all fact. Even little stuff like that. If you integrate that into a camp, like I reckon another 10 years you'll, or maybe not 10 years, whatever, but you'll have it down to a T of every single thing. This is the formula. This is what you do.
Yeah, I think that's just the way of research too, which is really exciting, is like you do a PhD and it's in a very specific area, right?
Yeah.
But then you do that PhD and you learn so much more about that, but then you have another 100 questions that you want to answer, and then that leads on to someone else doing a PhD and getting another 100. So it's just always that evolution of progression. Yeah, so it's really exciting. I think where we're at now, we're kind of coming through the first big wave of that, and I think you're seeing that in the quality of athletes that get around in MMA. It's insane. Like you literally have MMA athletes now that are trained all disciplines from when they're peewees, and they're good with their diet, they're good with their strength, they're good with their recovery.
Like
it's insane.
That's like it's a bit different, but have you seen the Michael Jordan?
I haven't watched it yet.
No, I haven't watched it yet.
It is unbelievable, right? He's brilliant. I'm not really a big basketball fan. Like I know who Jordan is and LeBron and all, but I have a mate who messaged me straight away. I said, "Have you seen this show?" He's like, "Yeah, it's good, but he's no LeBron." And I was like, I don't know enough about basketball, but I was like, man, he is, and Jordan's fucking Michael Jordan. And he was like, look, he is brilliant, but if you bring him in now, he'd be just an average player. And I was like,
oh, I reckon that's controversial.
No, but listen, but then the analogy, what he worked for me, he goes, yeah, he goes, right, this is the way I like understand is, he goes, right, you have Ronaldo and Messi in soccer. Was Pele and Maradona?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He goes, that's the equivalent of what you're trying to say. But you'd say no, that Messi and Ronaldo would be better because the game's changed, like their bodies have changed. So it's kind of hard to say. He goes, look at Jordan. He goes, Jordan's smaller than LeBron. He's slow, apparently slow, like all this stuff. So we go, look, he is what Jordan did, and his mind frame was brilliant. But if you, so it's an argument, but that's the same with fighters now. Like all these, like Chuck Liddell, Tito Ortiz, all these fighters years ago. When you look at the likes of Jones, Izzy, Connor, like it's hard. Are they on the same scale or are they not? Like, so it's. But look, everyone's progressive, so it's good.
Yeah.
Did it take you a while to start working with some of these big names? I mean, how long did it take you? Because I mean, you're probably the most well-known sports nutritionist, particularly for combat sports in Australia,
And New Zealand,
and Australasia. Did it take you a while to become? Or was it? I guess did you have to reach out to some of these guys, or did they reach out to you eventually? How did all that?
Yeah, there was definitely like a few guinea pigs along the way. That's for sure. One of my very first client, I'm still working with. And like I always talk to him about it, and we like have a laugh. I'm like, man, I've got a photo on my phone. I'll see if I can find it.
Has he gone through everything you've tried?
Yeah, literally everything. Like I remember the first weight cut we did, like was, I've got a photo of him, like sprawled out on the bathroom, and I thought I did a really good job. And he was like, man, that was amazing. We like look back on it now, and I'm like, oh, that was not too good, bro. But
you didn't drop dead.
Yeah, but like I'd say I was trialing it. I started seriously when I was in Jasper, so. It was probably between when I started doing it and said, okay, let's start trialing this with guys in the gym and whatnot. Yeah. Probably a good 18 months before I got my first UFC fighter, which was Ben Wynn, so Ben 10, who was from Brisbane.
Yep.
And it's a small scene, like the combat scene, especially in Australia, within Brisbane at least, it's a small scene and there's only a couple of coaches. So I was working with one fighter who trained with all these guys, and then so I'd go into the gym and see him, check up on him, do his skin fold or whatever, and do a body composition scan, talking through that, and then the other guys would kind of be like poking their head over and being like, what's this about? And that's kind of how it started. And then Ben had a fight coming up in Adelaide, and so he kind of reached out and said, hey, like, you know, what are you about? Like, how can you help? And blah, 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 and do all this. And that's kind of got me my introduction with the UFC scene in Australia. And then when I was down there, I met like Tyson Pedro, and that's when I came in that week, actually, like Kai Kara France and a couple of the city kickboxing boys were down there, and that's how I met them. And like I said, it's a small community, so if you're doing good work, like it's pretty important you're doing good work and you're keeping up and you're getting these guys results, like no one really wants to miss out on that. It's like you'll find that with like any sport really. If something new comes out, it's like, okay, well, like, can I get the advantage of doing that? And I think that contributed to it a lot. But it was probably like an 18-month process of those more smaller local guys, and like that's good. Like I was still figuring it out. Like I was trying, like I did that course in LA with George Lockhart, and I was like, oh, I still feel like there's a lot to
More to learn.
There's could be a lot to like improve on here. Like I read everything. Like I read Clint's work, I read Reed's work, I spoke to all these people, but like reading all that work and then doing it is two different things. And then how each person responds to that, I think that was the biggest learning. Was like
Everyone's different.
everyone's different, and you're like, okay, well, what do I do to adjust for that? So yeah, it was a big learning curve.
For the benefit of some of the listeners, could you take us through your role in the lead up to a fight? I guess like how long, what that might look like in terms of nutrition, and then obviously the final stages of the weight cutting itself.
Yeah, I guess nowadays, like I have a rule with my guys where we kind of keep it all like year round. Like there's a big thing called like the 52-week fight camp, which like a lot of people talk about nowadays. I guess traditionally what a lot of people, when fighters get ready, they'll book a fight and then they'll give themselves 8 weeks. Like that's just an arbitrary number, but people always give themselves 8 weeks. We call that the fight camp phase. And then we have that 1 week prior to the fight. We call that fight week. And then we have the weigh-ins, which is usually 30 to 36 hours before the fight. So we break it up into our fight camp phase, fight week phase, and then our weigh-in. So pre-weigh-ins, weigh-ins, and then post-weigh-ins. And then we've got our post-fight. And it usually goes back around in a circle. So I work really closely with guys all through that fight camp phase. So guys would reach out to me and say, because if people don't know, like combat sport athletes are usually walking around about anywhere between 10 to 20% higher body weight than what they compete at. And that's a runoff from this old philosophy and old theory that if you're bigger, you're stronger, you're faster than your opponent, right? So if I can go in I can walk around at 80 kilos, but I'm fighting at 70 kilos and my opponent rocks up at 70, and I can just drop all that weight to 70 and come back in at 80, I've got a 10 kilogram advantage. Whether or not that's true.
Do you think that's true? Well,
so there's been some good research. So Dr. Reed Reel was probably the first one to assess that. Where we're at with it now is that in the grappling-based sports, we definitely think there could be, because you're forcing your body weight onto someone. So it makes sense. And if, I don't know if any of you guys train, but if you do like jiu-jitsu or judo or anything like that, if you've gone into like an open weight class, like this happened to me a few times, hey, like super confident, go into an open weight class and you're like, oh God, like, and then you get going, no matter how good your technique is, hey, like I've had guys in full arm bars that just curl you and slam you, like they're just bigger than you. That's a real thing. When it comes to striking, and there's so much technical prowess about it, like I think of guys like Israel, like Dan Hooker, like all that city kickboxing, they're such technical strikers. So that weight advantage probably doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter how strong you are if you can't hit someone.
Sure.
So yeah, I think that's a real thing. So these guys will start walking around and they'll go, okay, I need to start getting ready. They'll bring me in and then we do like a whole host of assessments, right? So we'll do like a body composition scan. We do that every week just to see, because we want to bring them down slowly and safely and say we want to reduce, okay, we're fighting at 70 kilos and most of these guys are walking at, say, 85. Yeah. So it's like, okay, we kind of work backwards from this point. We go, weigh-in is 70 kilos. For that fight week, we know that using certain strategies like moving water around your body, moving glycogen around your body, reducing some sodium, things like that, we can shift weight probably up to about 10% fairly safely. So that puts us at about 77. So coming into that fight week, I need you to be 77. Now, if you're 85 kilos now and we've got 8 weeks to get to 77 kilos, we need to lose X amount of weight per week.
Yep.
So to lose weight, you need to be in a calorie deficit. But I guess where these guys bring me in and where the performance aspect comes in is these guys are training like madmen. Like they're doing 2 sessions a day, 2-hour sessions twice a day, and they don't want to be feeling like crap.
They need energy.
They need energy.
They don't want to be putting the weight on as well. So
exactly.
You need to be like...
And so the thing is, and this is where the whole aspect of performance nutrition comes in, and like we can talk about later, like what is performance in MMA? It's like these guys, especially at the high levels, are trying to get these extra 1%ers for like guys like us when we're rocking up to our local jiu-jitsu comp or doing like our boxing, probably being super strict with your nutrition, and it's probably good. Is it going to make that difference if you're not that high of a skill level, you know? But for these guys, you having the energy to sprawl and stuff a takedown, or you having the energy in the 5th round, the last 20 seconds to throw a 20-punch combo could be the difference between you winning and losing. And you see this all the time in the UFC. Like Kai's a great example where Kai, we unfortunately took the loss in Vegas against, what's his name, Brendan Moreno. And now Brendan's probably going to get the title shot for the flyweight, and that could have been Kai, and that was a close fight. So it's like, how much difference did it make? And that, like Kai, I think is still going to get there, and he'll be flyweight champ, but now we're just back a little bit. So it's like these guys bring me in, and it's okay, we don't want to be feeling fatigued. We don't want to be feeling like you haven't been sleeping well. You need to be adapting your body so when it comes time to sprawl that takedown in that 5th round, throw that explosive combo, enzymatically and metabolically, your body is primed to do that. And you can do that by targeting each training session and going, okay, this is a high-low training session. We need you to be very filled with carbs, but you know what? This Wednesday morning session isn't going to be. So we're going to utilize this overnight fast and maybe get some metabolic adaptations for your fat so we can work that recovery system so it becomes very, very dialed in.
Yeah. So like people might think, oh, you just get them in for the 8 weeks. Like you are like one of the most important part of the whole organization for a fighter. Like, it's not as if you just come in or I cut the weight. You are the difference between, as you said, them 3rd or 4th rounds. These are like very important in getting them ready. It's like when you think about how much goes into it, it's not as if you just rock up and say, okay, yeah, like most people think, like what I used to think, you get up, get in the sauna, you lose 10 pounds, and then that's it. You're from the day dot and you're just like, let's go.
Yeah, I think a lot of it too is like, and I'm pretty realistic, like there's a lot of guys that do really well that never use a nutritionist, and they can do just fine. Yeah. But it's like my whole philosophy is like, well, do you want to collect those extra 1% or not? Like some people, like Israel's a great example, never really took he did his nutrition, but not like as serious as say someone like Brad Riddell who does it 52 weeks a year, very, very serious. But Israel is just another level of athlete, so you could probably get away with it.
That's the difference as well, though, because if they only fight once a year, you might get away with it. But the likes of, you want to fight 2 or 3 times a year, your first fight you could be feeling right, all good, not do the proper dietitian. The next fight, that could have a really bad problem on your body, and you could be like fucked basically.
Yeah.
So is it like I'm guessing is it a gradual thing? So they come in at the start of the 8 weeks. Do you gradually reduce their carbohydrates, calories, whatever that might be? Is it done gradually, or is it right? Okay, let's get into shape. It's the sooner we go through that withdrawal stage and your body realizes it can't eat what it wants anymore, the better we can get in. I guess that is why we're so like at TFD we're so pedantic about these guys doing this all year round, because if you can come in being fit, you don't have to do it drastic, because at the end of the day, if you've got a whole lot of weight to lose, like you've got to make weight to compete. And a lot of people don't realize at the UFC, if you miss weight, you lose 20% of your purse. For a fighter that's only fighting 2-3 times a year and making say 25-30 grand a fight, and that's to win. If you're winning, like, and you lose 20% of that, that's a big thing, right? So like you've got to make that weight. So that could be the difference between your fight camp being like a fat camp or being a fight camp. And like we always say, it's like fight camp, that 8 weeks, you don't build better athletes, you refine them in that thing. So everything you're doing outside of that, you're just refining those skills. You're not learning how to do a kick better. You're just working on a game plan, and we're assisting that. But if they've got to lose a heap of weight in that time, that's going to be detrimental to their training performance, which is ultimately what's going to be the difference. Like, nutrition is important, don't get me wrong, but at the end of the day, these guys have to fight. Like, they have to fight. So it's like, my perspective is like, you come in and we come in, do this all year round, come in at a good weight, we'll do this gradually. I'll fuel you metabolically, make sure you're good. Whether or not that's going to make a difference in the fight, we don't know. Like, I don't know if what I do actually does make a difference. Like, we can get them on weight, do that. I just don't know too many top 10 UFC fighters who are willing to take the chance whether it does or does not. Yeah. So that's kind of where I'm at with it is, and what we say to our guys, stay ready. And that's what everyone's doing during this COVID time, especially these city kickboxing boys. They're all just staying ready because they want to be, if they get a call from Uncle Dana, they say
2 weeks,
3 weeks, be ready. It's like, hey, Jordi, where we're at. Okay, you've stayed fit. We'll probably have to go a little bit more aggressive, but it's not like we're coming from up here. So that's kind of the difference in the mindset, especially when you see like these high-level professional guys, and then like the professionals, and then the guys that kind of just do it. And then
do you see a few, like, before main events, a couple of fighters coming in and you're just looking, going, fuck man, this is going to be a tough weight cut for these, like a couple of bigger boys like Usman. He seems to be always massive before he comes in, but he sometimes makes weight. Yeah. Like, do you be like, I can't see him winning this fight here, but then obviously he does. Like,
well, the UFC, I know, like, so the UFC, like Clint Wattenberg and Charles and Alexa and Chef Mari, they have like a nutrition team, and it's amazing. Like, their service that they offer is, I've never seen anything, and I lean on them a lot when I go to, like, say the States or something. They like do a check-in where you have to go in and check everyone's weight, and they'll flag people, and they'll be like, this guy's blah, blah, blah. But they manage that. Like the UFC Nutrition Team, they get guys all the time coming in this red zone, and they've, like, credit to them, because I've got 8 weeks to work with my guys. Even if my guys are coming in the red zone, like, I know their metabolism so well. I know exactly how much food to feed them. Like, I know I've probably done multiple fight weeks with them, so I know how their body's going to respond to the strategies I use. Credit to Clint and his team, they don't have any of that info. And then they come in and they still manage to get these guys, like, on weight in a really safe manner and get them performing and reload them. But yeah, there's been, I think, more around, like, when guys are actually cutting weight, you can definitely tell the guys who have worked with someone or who haven't had guidance when, like, they're getting, like, the water cut, we call it, like that last bit when they're in the sauna or in the bath or whatever, and they come down looking like a corpse. We've all seen that, and it's like, well, that guy probably had a rough time.
Those guys, do the UFC pay them and every fighter has to go see them, or is it optional to go see them?
Completely free service. So it's like these guys rock up to the fight week when they do their check-in. So you've got guys like Charles, I always butcher his last name, Charles Stuhl, and Chef Mario, who are at every fight week. Like, they're going to be there all through that COVID, and they say, hey, do you want meals? And Chef Mario, so my chef in my team, Chef Damien, we do our big fight weeks, and because we look after so many UFC fighters in Australia and New Zealand, we work very closely with Clint and Chef Mario, because by the time they come over here with all the other athletes in the UFC, we're basically looking after everyone in the card. So it makes sense we all work together. So my chef works with Chef Mario, and he's taught my chef phenomenal things about how to make fight week food, like how to make food that's delicious with low sodium, that has low to moderate carbs, and is like taste like restaurant quality food. But they're offering that to every UFC fighter. I think since they started that service and doing that, I think they've seen something like a 50% reduction in missed weight.
Wow.
And it shows. And that service is like coming off the back of like all this research that I was talking about earlier, all these people putting a spotlight on this area. And I guess people seeing these really bad weight cuts and going, that's messed up. And the UFC going, okay, well, let's do something about it.
Did the UFC cover all that? They just pay for all that?
Yeah, they do it all. They cover it.
Do you know if Bellator or Fight Championship have anything like that? Have you ever heard?
I'm not too sure. But like the UFC, like they cover it. Like they have a deal with Trifecta, who Chef Mario works with. And like what I do with my guys in the fight camp, like that 8 weeks, like I have a meal prep company like TikTok Nutrition, who's like, he's the man. He'll sort all my guys out, custom made meals, send it out to them. But the UFC does that through Trifecta at no cost whatsoever to the athletes.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, isn't it? And I think that's a big reason, again, why the quality of fighting is so good. Again, nutrition is just one tiny part. But
you can see the results from the fighters.
Exactly, yeah.
What's the quickest turnaround you've ever done? And you don't have to share the fighter with us, but is there like some really tight spots you've been in? Like, Dana's called him. He's got I don't know how many days.
Yeah, so this is funny. I remember I was driving to a meeting on the Gold Coast to meet one of my fighters to talk about. It was when a UFC event was in Melbourne last year, maybe.
Oh yeah, we went.
Yeah. So it would have been. Was it February, that one? So like I think it was like January. I was meeting to go see one of my fighters and her manager and have a chat and whatever. I got a call from one of my other fighters saying, hey, such and such has dropped out of this fight. Sean Shelby's called, like my manager, we could be on. Like, this is my weight. And I went, oh, crap. And then like 10 minutes later, I'm driving down the highway, come on, Bluetooth speaker on. Hey, is this Jordi Sullivan? And I'm like, yeah. And it's like, hey, I'm such and such. I just got a call from Sean Shelby. I'm in. Like, except I'm this much weight. And I was like,
what do we do?
And that was a big one. I think he was about 16 kilos over. 16 kilos.
16
and I think we had 3 weeks. 3 weeks I think we had to do it. And like we did it. But this is the conversation we have. And this is why, like nowadays with my guys, if you sign up, I don't really do that. Where like I'll do guys with fight camp, but it's an 8 to 12 week thing. And then it's like I'll push them big time to do a year-round commitment, because I don't want my guys in that situation, because I have to sit down. And you see this now, and guys like Dr. Carl Langan-Evans has done a really good case study about what that does to your body when these guys do this rapid weight loss in such short amount of time. Like I was saying earlier, when we have that time, you can bring the body fat down, you get to a really nice level, and then I can play around with water. And it's not easy by any sense, but it's manageable. But when you've got 3 weeks to get that much weight, you can do it.
It's dangerous.
Absolutely do it, but you're frying your body. And I had to sit this guy down and say, hey man, like I'm 90% confident you'll have lasting kidney damage from this, your liver. Like I made him get blood tests from the doctors and before and after and like to monitor all that. But at the end of the day, this was his big chance.
How did he go?
Well, yeah, we made the weight. We got there.
And how did he go in the fight?
Not the best, but
That's what we were saying. So before you came, we were talking. Right, what do you reckon Ferguson making weight 2 weeks before he's fighting? Was it like we were like, oh, there's no way he could have benefited from that. No way.
It depends how you cut it. I think it depends how, like, what he walks around at, and then how he made the weight. Like, if he's doing it properly, like, he probably could. But I don't know.
Did you see the fight?
Yeah.
I thought he looked a bit off, didn't he?
Yeah.
Look, I take nothing away from Gagey because I thought Gagey fought the fight of his life, and he did amazing. But I still felt as though Ferguson just wasn't
at the races. He
just wasn't at the races, was he? You know, like, I don't know. He's a warrior. He's a warrior. But we were talking about, we were thinking, oh man, it would be interesting to hear your thoughts on that, you know. But it depends, I guess, on what he works around.
Well, that's the thing, and I think if I go back to that study, like we have a case study from a Cage Warriors champion, without saying too much, a prior featherweight champ who since moved up to lightweight, and if you follow the sport, you probably know who that is. But his team basically did an observational study where they said, okay, we're not going to intervene and tell this guy what to do. We're just going to observe, but we're going to take measures. And so this guy, I think he ended up losing in that final week 10% of his body weight, but in that last 24 hours did about 7 or 8%. Something, I'll probably butcher in the numbers. But what they did was they tested all his bloods. He did all his electrolytes. Like, they did a cardio test, like a VO2 max C. They like monitored his body composition. And what they found is that he went what we call like hyponatremic, is when like you lose so much electrolytes in your body that you are at high risk of, say, things like seizures and slipping into a coma, and there's a threshold, and he was well above the threshold when he made that weight.
Day before a fight.
So and he had all these other markers of kidney health that were absolutely shot. What else did he have? They tried to do like a cardiovascular test with him. Couldn't get up and walk, couldn't do the test. I remember talking to the researcher, and he said drawing blood was so difficult because obviously when you're sweating, you're losing fluid out of your blood. It goes from your blood, like in your plasma volume, out to your skin, and that's evaporating. That's how your body cools itself. But you're losing that fluid. And the thing is, when you dehydrate that rapidly, like your body has fluid in compartments. So like we're all made of cells, right? Like everyone knows that. And getting in and out of a cell is like quite tough, and there's all fluid in there. And then there's like all this space in between, and then there's our blood. And when we sweat, it's a shift of fluid from those compartments. And if we're only sweating like a little bit, like 1 to 2% of our body weight, we're just moving fluid from this outside compartment. So it's like very easy to get back in. So you just drink water and it's like your stomach's here and then all this compartment's here. But when you're getting up in that like 3, 4, 5%, all of a sudden you have to go from this middle compartment and go back out. And then when you get these big cuts, like 10% body weight in water, your body moves this and it goes, I need to balance this out a bit. So it starts taking from inside the cells, and it moves it from and the scary thing about that is that when you're testing hydration, say you're doing like you pee in a cup and, you know, they put it in that thing, like urine-specific gravity, you can do that test. You can test the blood. You can draw the blood and test the fluid in that. You can do plasma osmolarity, which is like a part of the blood that you can test, but you can't test the water in the cells. So there's no way as scientists to know if that has been rehydrated. And this is a big issue. Say one championship does the pee test and everyone thinks it's great, but I know for a fact that people cheat that. Like I know how to cheat that. I've had my athletes cut weight and cut a significant amount of weight and be very dehydrated, but pass that dehydration because it's just basic physiology, how you get around that. And like, I'll openly admit it because I don't think it's the best test and I don't think it's a good system it's a good initiative. But that's the thing, is that when these guys are doing that, they're doing all that damage to their body metabolically, like enzymatically, their kidneys, like they're doing all this stuff. And then we're moving this water and we don't know if we're putting it back in. Like we have a good idea about how physiology works and we need to put in certain amounts of electrolytes and glucose to get that water. But there's no physical test for us to know in 36 hours time if they've taken water from those cells, did it get back in? And then you go, what's the effect of that? And coming back to, say, that fighter where we did that really big weight cut, my worry comes, okay, what happens in a fight? Like you're fighting, you're eating a lot of shots to the head, your brain's in your head, and then you've got these cells that have taken these water out and they've shrunken, right? And I always use the analogy of, say, putting a stone in a cup of water, full water, and you shake that around. Doesn't really do much. You take the water out of that cup and shake it around, and think that's happening to your brain. So it's like these guys who are doing these crazy big water cuts, how often is that happening? So you've got that potential damage that we have no way of measuring, and you've got this potential damage to your organs and everything else that's happening. How are we measuring that? Yet we're saying, oh, no, they're good in 30, 36 hours. They put the weight back on, but we don't know. We don't know.
I remember watching, do you remember the show, not Tough Enough, what's the show all the UFC fighters go to train?
The Ultimate Fighter?
Ultimate Fighter.
Yeah.
Do you remember, it was a while back, it was like number 1 or 2, there was a guy it was a famous scene, I always see it on YouTube, he was fighting and he was crying in the sauna and they were picking up and he was limp, and I was like, he's cutting this much weight, he's supposed to fight, there's no way. He didn't, he ended up getting the head slapped off him, but I was like, how do they let their bodies not, like, you're going to fight soon, why are you putting yourself through this drama of dangerously cutting weight? Like, I don't think it can be good for you.
No. But some of this, I mean, like, there's a variety. I mean, money is a big one. Some of them are the professional fighters. That's what they do. I always look at like Max Holloway, who I love as a fighter. He's probably one of my favorite fighters. But before he was due to fight Ortega, I think it was. Remember when he they called the fight off because
they said he had a stroke or something.
He was weight cutting and he just stopped. And you could see some of the interviews. You were like, oh.
Some were saying he mightn't ever fight again.
I was like, oh, I don't. What are some of the strategies that you use to weight cut? And you don't have to share your secret strategies. I'm just thinking for some of us that are UFC diehards, it's curious to know. Obviously saunas we see. I mean, I watch Embedded, and and you always see saunas floating around somewhere. But what are some of the different things that people use, I guess, for
yeah, man, I'll openly share. And this is the whole point of the Fight Dietitian. What it's about is like one of our main pillars is like our first main pillar of TFD is one, using like evidence-based nutrition scientific protocols in this community. And the second big pillar that like myself and all my team go by is highlighting and raising awareness of the potential risk of weight cutting and then mitigating those risks. So like I'll share as much as this as you guys want. So it's like we put this all like through our Instagrams and socials and everything. It's like we do this fight camp and that we have strict rules about how much you can come in and how much you can come down and how much weight you can lose. When you get to that fight week, you're using what's called like a fight week strategy or fight week strategies. And so it's pretty well accepted that between 10%, if you've got that 30, 36 hour weigh-in, that you can get 10% off pretty safe. So like the first, and I'll go from like lowest risk to highest risk, is what we call like a low fiber, low residue diet. So fiber, you eat it, it's in all the foods that you're told that are typically healthy, like your brown rice, brown bread, fruits, vegetables, all have fiber in it. All very healthy. Rest of the year, eat it as much as you can. For about 3 days prior to your weigh-in, if you take fiber out of your diet, and that means just swapping from brown rice to white rice, peeling the skin off your vegetables, you minimize the amount of contents you have in your gut, because when you eat more fiber, it takes a bit more time to go through. And so what that does is when you take that out, you just transit through. You just go to the bathroom more and you physically have less weight. And we know you can get about 1 to 2% of your body weight, even up to 3% if you have a really high fiber diet, just off by doing that. So when you have guys like doing jiu-jitsu matches where you literally weigh in and you go into the bullpen and you could potentially be up, using a strategy like that, you still get lots of carbs, but it's pretty easy just to not eat fiber for 3 days and you lose like up to potentially 3% of your body weight. Next thing you can do is you manipulate fluid within the body. Like I said, you've got all these compartments. Your body can be up to 60, 65%, even 70% fluid. So you've got a lot in there. The thing is, what we can do is, I'm sure you guys have seen like water loading when these guys are drinking a lot of water. So like Reed Real, who did the AIS, is really the only one study about that. And essentially what that does is it plays with a couple hormones in your body. And a couple people will say that it's this flick in these hormones that causes you to trick your body to keep urinating. I don't think you're necessarily tricking your body. Your body's pretty smart. You're not tricking it. But by doing that and causing this effect of constant urination, it translocates, I call them like gatekeepers, in your kidneys that open up more gates that let you urinate more. So like, think of it when you're building muscle, you're lifting weights, you're building muscle. Think of it as like you're building gates in your kidneys to let more water out. And that effect will only happen for like, say, 6 hours and your body will figure out that the water. So you timing that water load, you could potentially lose a bit more fluid. You can reduce salt because we know salt is osmotically active. So if we reduce the salt, like I don't cut salt at all because it's important. You need salt in your body for muscle contraction and things like that. You need that in your body, but you can stop any exogenous salt in the diet and you're not going to hold as much fluid. Plus you're going to be urinating fluid out because you're drinking so much water. So you can reduce up to about 1 to 2 to 3% depending on the person just by doing that. So just by cutting fiber foods out and drinking a bit of water, you can get that effect. And you don't even need the water load. A lot of people don't water load. You can just stop drinking water for say 18 hours. And obviously you're going to keep urinating and you're going to push that fluid out. So that's an option that you can use. Next thing you do is what we call a glycogen reduction. And that's when we take carbohydrates out of the diet, because we know that when you eat carbohydrates, they break down into these little building blocks and your body doesn't want to waste them. So we have a set amount that we can store in our muscles and in our liver. And every time we store this, we store for every 1 gram of glycogen, we store 2.7 grams of water with it. So in total, there's the 1 gram plus 2.7 grams. So we've got 3.7 grams of weight. So if we can take that carbohydrate out, we're losing the glycogen weight plus the water weight. And so that's weight. And then let's just say for a typical, and again, this is like, glycogen's a very funny one because there's no way that we can physically measure how much glycogen. We have theoretical considerations on how much. Anyone that tells you that they can calculate how much glycogen it's not true. Like you physically can't do it. There's one paper that kind of estimates it in athletic pop, but we know the effect that happens when you decrease that glycogen. So that's another thing. And you can lose up to 3 to 4, maybe more %, depending on how well trained you are. If you train in different ways, you can have more glycogen in your muscles. So you can lose a lot of weight just by doing that. But this is where it kind of gets a bit more risky because carbohydrates are super important for combat sports. And the new research that's coming out, something I do a lot, is I try to delay that as much, or I try not to cut that carbohydrate out because these guys are still training for a fight that week, getting ready. And I don't want them to be completely flat tack.
They still need energy.
So you still need that carbohydrate around your training. And the thing is, like, your body's very smart. If you cut that carbohydrate out, it's like, remember the use it or lose it principle? Like with your, we think that it might be similar for how you metabolize carbohydrate. So if you cut out carbohydrates, some guys do it for up to 10 days. And like I said earlier, like some people I've heard like 8 weeks with no carbohydrates. Use it or lose it. You just pretty much lose the function.
Make you a lot weaker and
you can't physically go into that 5th gear or 4th and 5th gear and stuff that takedown and do that finishing sequence and you'll see it. So we try to keep carbs as high, but you can strategically reduce the glycogen and get that weight loss. And then the last thing that you want to do, if you need to do it, is cut the water, like the water cut. And that's when you're either actively, like through exercise, sweating and moving water through those compartments, or you're passively doing it, sitting in a sauna, in a bath, in a hot room, whatever you're doing. And so I guess in that order, that's probably our lowest risk to our highest risk in terms of both health and performance. The water cutting is pretty high risk. Glycogen's obviously moderate to high risk because of the importance of carbohydrates. The first two are pretty low risk, so everyone should be using that. So they're the strategies we use. How we use that for each person is very independent. I have guys that they like to do that final water cut through exercising, and there's benefits to doing that. And then certain people respond to, say, if you reduce glycogen. I have some guys that I don't have to glycogen deplete. I can get 10% of their body weight off, and I don't need a glycogen deplete, and they can eat carbohydrates right up until they're fighting. It's just assessing that body, and there's certain tests you can do right at the start of fight camp and all the way through. You can see how effective they are at metabolizing fats and carbohydrates, see what their body composition's like, get a rough idea of their skeletal muscle mass, things like that, that can better inform that fight week strategy. So it's like by the time you get to this fight week, and especially when you do a couple fights with these guys, the numbers. So it's like when things aren't going right, you're like, okay, well, you're probably holding too much glycogen because we've done the exact same thing as we did last time. Or I know in my prep that part of this prep, I kept those carbohydrates really, really high. So I know we've got that little bit of buffer. So yeah, all we're doing that fight week is it's like artificial weight loss. But I think too many people try to throw this blanket statement at it and like say, okay, cut carbs, have no salt, water load, drink as much water as you can. And that in itself is almost like punishment and counterproductive because you're in that high risk of the health and performance. Like what we're doing, like at Fight Dietitian, we've kind of accepted that. We've kind of got that down pat. We know it. It's like, how far can we push all of those? Like right now we're playing around with how far and how long can we keep those carbohydrates in, and do we really need to cut them down that far? Sodium, do we even need to reduce it to get this effect? Do we need to be water loading for 3 to 4 to 5 days, or can we get that effect in 48 hours? Do we even need to do it? So they're the things like you start, and that's when you start looking at that 0.1 to 1% performance difference, because as you guys can see, when people rock up to weigh-ins, and that's when at me as a professional, I look at guys and go, that was a rough week for him. And like, if my guys are drawn out and they look like crap, I've probably, like, even though they've made weight, it's a success, whatever, we're going to put water back in, the electrolytes, and feed them. That's not the point for me. I don't care about them making weight. We're all going to make weight. You guys could get them on weight. You could read my Instagram and figure out how to... It's that. And it's like, okay, well, what are we going to do next time? It's like, I don't really... Like with Israel, it's like, everyone like was saying, Israel makes weight easy. It's like, I don't care. Like that's not... I want Israel to be champ for as long as possible. He is quite possibly going to be the Muhammad Ali of our generation. He's the most phenomenal athlete I've ever worked with. And it's like... And he's got this potential, like with his nutrition, do even better. So it's like scary. Same with like all those city kickboxing guys. Our role with them isn't so much about getting in there and making weight. It's like, what's the long term? It's like, I need these guys being really, really healthy, really, really high performance athletes for a long time, all year round, to get to that end goal. It's like, it's not just about that fight, it's about what's happening in the rest of their career. So I guess that's like the focus of what we have.
That's so cool.
Yeah,
that process is awesome.
Mental, but it's touching on city kickboxing. Like, how mad is it that you have so many like elite, like you have 2 champs, you have hookers floating around there, like that possible. Like, who's he supposed to fight next? He's
Poirier.
It's what I mean.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's for a small little gym in New Zealand. You have fucking a lot of great fighters.
A lot of
it's
great
brilliant.
fighters out there. That was awesome. Like to hear.
You touched on everything
what,
there.
What about so that your fighter makes weight, then you've got 36 hours, is it, until they actually
30 to
fight?
36, yeah.
How much do you say, okay, go for it, you know, like load up on sort of whatever you want, and then how much do you go, okay, we need to choose good choices here, I guess. What process?
Yeah, I guess there's like 2 important points. Is like, one is we don't know. Like in the science, like people will tell you all these things to do post weigh-ins, make a shake with BCAA, show these weird colors, and we don't know. Like straight off the bat, we don't know. No one's really looked at it. Like I said, with that, the different compartments, even if you were to look at it, how are we going to know if it worked or not? Like a lot of the response and feedback we're getting is biofeedback. Hey, do you feel good? Can you run around? Do you feel like, have your skin come back to good? Have you done all this, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, there's like a bit of freeway. I like to get my guys, like there's a certain amount of fluid. Obviously what you took out, you need to put back in. So I like to preach to my guys, like 150% of the fluid that was lost, you need to put 150% back in. So say you lost 1 liter of fluid, you need to put 1.5 liters of fluid back in. We know by nature of how our kidneys work, our kidney doesn't assess how much fluid's coming in by just fluid, it's by the electrolyte balance. So we know that you need to put sodium and potassium and these things in. We know if you put glucose in there, it's more favorable for the transporters to get them in there. So we know that you can give these guys a drink with how much fluid they need to replace. You can make the electrolyte balance favorable for their body to upload it, like to get it in there. Whether or not it gets there, we just don't know. But you can, as a practitioner, my due diligence from here is like, okay, I just need to give that to you and off, because that's what we know now. That's best practice right now. After that, we know, okay, if we glycogen depleted, how extensively did we do that? Did we rip out all your glycogen during the week? Well, no, we didn't. So maybe we don't have to go super ham on the pasta and everything. I always say to my guys, like, it's just one more day. It's one more day, then you can enjoy your meal afterwards. So it's like, let's keep it pretty clean. Like, eat the foods that, you've been craving, but you'll have a set amount of numbers. Say the amount of fluid you need to put back in, the amount of electrolytes you need to put back in. If we've glycogen depleted, there is this amount of carbohydrate we need to put back in your body. Get those numbers in. And if you want to go out with the team, like we always go out for team dinners, yeah, okay, eat whatever. But all those steps, like, and I'll say it openly, we don't quite know, like, because no one's really studied it for combat sports. And you've probably seen it, like, with that glycogen, when you're getting that back in the muscle,
a lot of that research is based on glycogen repletion is people after they run like a marathon or they lift weights or they do exercise. And what happens in your body is you have these things called GLUT4 receptors. They come to your muscle, and without you doing anything, they'll help you take up the carbohydrate into your muscle. And they come because as a byproduct or a secondary product of the exercise. But when we're sitting in a sauna or in a bath and we're cutting weight that way, we're not necessarily doing that exercise. So those transporters may not come across. They probably haven't come across. So how does that affect the amount that you're taking up this carbohydrate? Like, we don't know. But we can say, like, we can theoretically say, hey, I give you this much fluid, I give you this much electrolyte and this much carbohydrate, you should be good to go. But, like, I'll say it openly, we don't know.
Yeah, and that's, like, I think that's probably why you seem to get, like, quite a lot of credibility, because you're very honest and open with that type of stuff. And like, I think one of the best ways to get credibility about what you do is just to be open and honest and share some of the things you do. You know, like, even in the strength and conditioning world, the coaches that share their knowledge are often looked upon as some of the best coaches, and the coaches that secretly keep their knowledge because they think what they're doing is better than everybody else, and they don't want to give away the secrets. They're more often, they're never thought about quite as some of the greats in what we do. What sort of, like, performance markers or methods of assessment do you use? Not necessarily, I guess, in the lead up to a fight, but just in general. What type of things do you do, like, to figure out where somebody's at? So, skin calibrations, DEXA scans. I know you meant that type of stuff.
Yeah.
Where?
Yeah, so our basic assessment, like, we have an initial intake that everyone sends out, like, just looking at, like, their past medical history, doing all of that. Like, do you have any allergies, food intolerances? Do you have a dietary preference? Are you vegan, carnivore, whatever? Like, we'll make all that work. Are you taking supplements? What's your training schedule look like? When I assess guys' training schedules, we get them to do, like, a self-reported RPE of what they think they're burning. And then, like, for our testing period for about 2 weeks, we get the guys to do heart rate monitors, and they wear the heart rates all through those sessions so we can get that. If we have access to it, I'll get them to go to their strength conditioning coach or exercise scientist and run a VO2 so we can cross-correlate that information to see, just to better inform me. Like, it's not perfect by any means, but to give me a better idea, like, what they're burning in each session and how I'm going to fuel, and that helps the periodization further down the track. Other things, we're getting our DEXA scans if we have available. Like, I'm happy with InBody. Like, we work pretty closely with InBody New Zealand, and they help out City Kickboxing a lot. So every week in that fight camp, we're tracking that body composition, how that's changing. Like, again, from a starting point, that's really important. Like, a lot of people come to me and they're like, oh man, my body fat's so high. It's like, that's a good thing. Like, if it's scary if your body fat's really low and you want to cut a bunch of weight, we've got nowhere to take it from. So it's like, if it's high, that's where we can, like I was talking about earlier, we can plan that descent. Blood work, we don't, like, it's not like you can assess someone's blood work and then design them a diet based on their blood work, but it's good to keep in track. Obviously, like, over every 6 months, maybe I'm doing something wrong and I'm letting something slip, and maybe they're going iron deficient. And there's things, if you regularly check it, like especially iron, B12, B6, things like that, if you're doing, like, you're staying on top of it, then you'll catch it before it becomes a big problem. And, like, especially with female athletes, things like that, that's a big problem. Even if you're fueling them properly, just by the sheer massive volume of training they're doing, that can happen. And the last thing you want is for them to go, say, iron deficient or anemic because you haven't been checking those bloods. So we do that every 3 to 6 months with our athletes. And then just during the camp, like, it's like a weekly check-in. My 30 athletes that I work with, I've got other guys in the team that work with the rest of our guys. Like, I'm pretty much talking to them every day, getting that biofeedback. They send through their training data. They'll send me the heart rates, and I just keep a full spreadsheet. Again, it's not entirely accurate, but it better informs me. And again, all of this is, like, nutrition isn't a complete science. It's not like there's a lot of interpretation to it, but you're more tracking trends over time. So if I know these guys are sending me all this data and I'm looking at it and their weight's coming down like I expect it to, they're probably responding in the way that I want it to. Like, I might not be getting it completely bang on, but they're probably doing it. So that's pretty much what we're doing. Do you just use, like, MyFitnessPal to track that type of stuff? To be honest, I don't really track a lot of, like, calories and macros. It's just, like, there is, like, you absolutely have to. Like, I'll do it. I kind of work off a system like grams per kilogram of fat-free mass is how I work out, like, how many carbohydrates and fat that they need and how much, like, protein. Probably 10% of my clients, they like to do it. They like to track their calories. And if they like to do it, then for sure, I think that's good in terms of like understanding what's in food and appreciating that this food is higher in carbs and fats and blah, 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 and whatever. I'm just not really into that. I was never really taught to do it that way. I think a lot of it is coming like bodybuilding culture and physique athlete culture where you have to track. You do have to know what's in there, but I think that whole system of calories in, calories out is so much more in depth than what we appreciate, and it's more like calories in affects calories out. There's this whole metabolic and hormonal system that works on that we don't quite understand yet. Maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm just dumb and I don't know what everyone else knows, but the system I use just seems to work for the population that I work with. So I just don't really do it, and I don't really feel the need to change it.
I know you're known as the Fight Dietitian, but do you do other athletes? Do you do other sports? Or are you just now you're just zoned in on fighters to specialise in that? Or like, do you get like rugby league players messaging you? Or like me and Billy are trying to run a marathon here. I'm going to ask you a few questions about what me and Billy can eat. Do you get people? Do you trying to push them away and say, look, mate, I'm busy with the fight scene? Or are you open to other people messaging you and stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think when I started, it was absolutely fine. I think come back to like those two pillars that I had with the company. It was like obviously the evidence-based nutrition for the combat community, highlighting and mitigating the risk of around weight cutting. Like our last pillar is just spreading the awareness and the benefits of physical activity and good nutrition. And that's something now that we've kind of a bit more established, and we've kind of not completely ticked off those two. Like we're still working, but we've had a pretty good impact in those first two areas. We're really focusing on that bottom one now. So it's like we are taking on athletes. I got footballers, I got surfers. Like I personally work with like 30 guys that are like kind of the
elite.
I don't want to say elite. Like I've got guys down here that are really, really good. But like the top end of guys that require a lot more time than other guys on my team. Yeah, we take on like a lot of people. Like we got footballers, we've got soccer players, surfers, golfers, all sorts. And like it's interesting because it keeps you on your toes. Like marathon runners, cyclists, and it's like. But I'll always say to them, the thing is like why we can get along with fight. Like I'm not a pro fighter. Like I'm a very, very average when it comes to like combat sports training, but at least I understand it. I do it, and I do it 6 days a week, twice a day, and I get in there and you can kind of understand it. But I always make it clear, say if I've got like a triathlete come on, it's like, man, I've never run a triathlon. Like theoretically, this is what you should do, and you should be, putting in this amount of carbohydrates of this, but like, I don't know if that's it, when you're actually doing it, does that sit well in your gut? I don't know, because I've never done it. And I'm very open about that with these guys. And I'm like, maybe you can go look and see if there's, I don't know, the triathlete dietitian out there or whatever, and go talk to them. I'm very open, but like a lot of them, I think they just want to, for whatever reason they want to work with us, we're not going to say no. Yeah. But if I think that we don't know enough about that area, I'll 110% of the time send them to someone who does know. So, yeah.
I'm just interested to hear your thoughts on, obviously, recently we've seen the Game Changers documentary on Netflix, which has been, I think, very controversial. That's what I was looking for. But obviously, every couple of years we see a new diet fad or a new diet. I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that type of stuff. Not like specifically vegan, like being a vegan or vegetarian or whatever, or keto, being on a ketogenic diet. Do you advise anyone to go down certain routes? Do you take anybody on that? I just wanted to hear your thoughts on different.
Yeah, I think everyone gets squeamish around. Like vegan's a good way, and everyone gets squeamish, but we can talk about it because. Like I share my opinions on it, but I have athletes who are vegan who are absolute beasts. I've got Australian champions who are vegan and they do that very, very well. I've also had athletes who've gone vegan and it's nearly ruined their career. So it's like, and you can do that whatever which way you look at it. If it's carnivore, if it's keto, you can make probably not keto for combat sports, but whatever it is, you can make it work if you do it the right way. Like the thing is like with nutrition, it's not a complete science, but there are set rules that exist within the system that is our body, right? Like carbohydrates, proteins, fats, all have structures. And when you eat them, they get broken down to those structures. They go through your metabolism. They have pathways that they go through. Metabolism is a very tricky subject, which we don't entirely understand yet, but we know enough of it. I always describe it as like a big jigsaw puzzle, and there's missing pieces of the jigsaw puzzle, and we're kind of just filling in the gaps. That's kind of nutrition, but we know enough about that jigsaw puzzle. We can make some pretty good recommendations about. So when people say to me, I want to do vegan, I want to do carnivore, I want to do all this, it's like, I don't really care. Like, it's like in my mind, whatever. Like, I just know the rules of this system. Like every macro that you break down has a role. Like you can, for combat sports, that glycolytic, that carbohydrate pathway, it goes down and you get energy by running through the Krebs cycle and producing ATP here. If there's no carbohydrate, your body goes down, it goes to this thing called acetyl-CoA, and you can shuttle out to the ketogenic system and you can live happily without eating carbohydrates. But it's just very person dependent. Like if a combat sport athlete comes to me and goes, I want to go ketogenic, I'll go, well, no, that doesn't really fit in with the system you're trying to apply to. Same with like all your vitamins and minerals. They all have a role within this metabolic system and these pathways, like whether they come in here, and if you become deficient in this, like if you become deficient in vitamin C, you get scurvy and things like that. So I don't really care what you're doing. If you're vegan, I don't know, pescatarian, whatever, I don't care. Yeah. As long as we're checking all the boxes in this pathway, I'm fine with it. Yeah. The thing is, when you do things like vegan, there's just probably a few more boxes you need to look out for. And it's like, okay, like we need to make sure your vitamin B12 is good, your B6, and okay, probably might have to supplement with protein, but it's not saying that that's bad. It's just you've just got to like, it's just like, just make sure this is all working well. And if your sport is combat sports, we know that this is probably a favorable way to go about it. I don't care what way you go about it, just make sure you tick these boxes off. I just think people get really like attached to these ideas and they get like, and I always say like, because food, essentially you eat it, break it down, and then it's what's used to build you. Like it's essentially you. So when you eat food, it becomes your body, and it becomes like such a part of your identity. And we love to like own things like that and say like, I'm a vegan, or I'm on the carnivore diet, because you have such an intimate relationship with that diet and how it's made your body feel. Whereas like you may not be looking at it critically. And I think that like N=1 philosophy, where it worked for me, so it'll work for you, isn't the best way to go about it. Because like, yeah, we have this system, but like there's some little changes that could happen between each person that could affect this system. And you kind of have to take that in consideration. So yeah, they exist. I think business mind me looks at things like the Game Changers and go, man, that guy just created a vegan protein company, and then he released this movie and it blew up and he probably made millions. And business me goes, man, what a genius. And then like nutrition scientist me goes, that was probably very misleading and probably sent a lot of people astray. But whatever, like it is what it is.
It's interesting. I mean, I've done I don't like necessarily jump from diet to diet because I like fads or I want to lose weight, but I like experimenting with different things, and I've done pretty much everything. I haven't done the carnivore diet, although I am tempted to try that. But I do love experimenting with different things and trying things out, and I like to be able to hold a conversation about something and give my opinion on it, if I've tried it, you know. But one of the things, like for me personally, I've been fasting on and off since about 2014, 15. And that for me, my body feels great on fasting on a 16 and 8. And I've tried various other things along the way, but it's always good just to hear other people's thoughts on it and stuff like that, you know. It's interesting. And like, I guess is there anything that, is there any secrets, or is there any secret 1% of stuff that you have for, or that you recommend your athletes to do? I mean, okay, I'll give you one example. When I was coming through uni, there was the whole, we were learning about the whole bicarb loading thing. And I've toyed around with it a little bit in CrossFit, and I've done some endurance stuff as well. So I've played around with bicarb loading. I don't know if I've told you this. Is there anything like that you advised your guys to do, with any little secrets? Is there, or even potentially new areas of study that could lead to something interesting? Maybe?
Yeah, I've got like a bit of an interesting, because I think you need to break it down. People always like ask me about fasting, but it's like, I'm not an expert on fasting. Like my area and like my lane is kind of performance nutrition. I think performance nutrition and health are very different things. I think fasting, I'm not too up to date with the research, but I think it's very promising in what it could do for your health. Fasting for me, like I'll utilize with my guys because it's just an easy way to control calories coming in. Like that's all it is in my mind, but I'm not disputing that there could be. It's just in terms of performance, I don't know. Like I don't know, but in terms of are there little things, supplements always comes up, and it's like everyone's like, oh, what's the supplement I could take? And you know, if you've gone to uni and you've done it, we could go back and forth and talk about the pros and cons of everyone. For me, what I have found working, like anecdotally working with, so my 2 most successful clients who have done very, very good things. They've achieved big things, and they're the best in the world at their sport. Neither of them take supplements. And like both of them take their diet seriously and they strengthen, they do it all. But I think there's probably something else that's contributing to their success a bit more, whether that's the mental side of it. They're just mentally stronger, whether they're just more gifted genetically, whether they just work harder than everyone else. So I think if you're looking for like that edge and you're like, if you're that top athlete or that top CrossFitter, I think, yeah, okay, let's have a talk about how creatine could maybe give you that edge, or maybe beta-alanine or bicarb soda or nitrates or something like that. Maybe it could. Or maybe you just need to get in the gym and just keep working, you know, and do it. Like, that's my opinion on it. And I think there's just defining like what a performance is. This is something like in MMA, especially, like what is a good performance in MMA? It's like we ran 2 case studies where we like assessed guys cutting weight and tracked everything, food, like energy out, like what their bloods were doing, how they responded like straight after. Like, I don't think it's ever been done, and I don't think we'd ever get ethical approval to do it. It was just like a team of us that did it, like doing measurements like mid-thigh pulls, box jumps right before they came into the bath, and then we did it right after, and then we did it 6 hours after, and then we saw what the performance was like. And the guy that was the worst, that didn't recover, he like lost about 40% functionality like across the board. He knocked his opponent out in like a blinder of a fight. And then the guy that recovered and pretty much went back to baseline and everything got choked out in the second round. So it's like, how much of an effect does it all have when it comes down? I don't know. Like, I just don't know.
That's like, I was listening to I listened to a lot of Joe Rogan stuff, and you know the ultra marathon runner Zach, I think his name's Zach Bitter.
Yeah.
He holds the record for running some record. I think he ran 11,000 miles or something anyway. But he was just talking about, asking him what does he do, and he's like, I don't do anything too crazy. Like, obviously you think a guy that can run 11 hours straight and hold the record, you'd be like, all right, what's he taking? But he's like, I don't really take much stuff. And then he started talking about the girl who holds the record, and apparently she doesn't do anything at all. She just eats junk food, drinks beer. She's like, they had her on as well. I forget her name, but she was like people ask me the most asked question is, what's your diet? What do you eat? And she's like, I don't eat anything crazy. I've no special drug in me. I've no, because they get tested. She's like, I just train hard. She's like, but then some people take every supplement there is and it helps them. So everybody is different. It's not.
I think it also depends on, like, and this is just my view, you know, I look at some sports and I see it like a spectrum. I see like high skill sports like MMA and UFC on one side, and then I see low skill sports like endurance running on the other side. And you look at it and you think, okay, like say nutrition and even strength and conditioning in some respects, we could have very, very little input. What am I trying to say? I guess you could take athletes that are very, very skilled in that area, have no nutritional background, very little strength and conditioning work, and still perform really well because they have got an unbelievable skill. You know, and then on the other side of things, you could do the same with an endurance athlete. So I guess
I hate going back to it, but it's like Messi and Ronaldo.
Yeah.
Apparently Messi doesn't train as hard as Ronaldo's. Be sitting 1,000 sit-ups a day, putting all these videos up, and everyone's like, "Oh, Ronaldo's worked harder," but it's everyone's different. Like what they both can do, it's so different. But every athlete, it's hard to obviously find that. You can say what you're going to benefit from, but everyone's different.
One of the things I wanted to ask yourself, and I ask a lot of our guests this, like, is there any resources that you use, any books you read, anywhere you go just to stay like current in what you do and latest, you know, in I guess research and stuff like that, in interest?
Yeah, I'm kind of lucky. Like I said, like I run the podcast, so I get like a lot of researchers on. So like the Fight Science podcast, if anyone's into like what I do and kind of the big word sciencey part of it, I highly recommend, because I get people on that are far smarter than me. Like, and people hear me talk and I think they get the false assumption that I know all these things, but really I'm just a parrot to these guys who are far smarter. I'm just fortunate how things have played out, that I'm lucky enough to work with certain guys and put it to use, and probably with guys that have a bit more media coverage and whatnot, and that kind of works a bit more in my favor. But there's guys that come on that podcast who are phenomenally smart, and they're just so innovative, and they're just, the way they think about things is just, my brain would never do that, but I get to benefit that. So that's like the Fight Science podcast. If you're just starting out in the area, Dr. Reed Reel has a book called Combat Sports Nutrition, which kind of just runs through Nutrition 101. Clint Wattenberg's, that book I was talking about earlier, that had a big impact on me, Performance Nutrition for Wrestling, is really good. I'd highly recommend that. Making Weight for Combat Sports by Dr. James Morton is pretty much the platform. I've tweaked it a bit, but the skeleton of how I go about my practice. And like I said, I'm very like open and honest about all of this stuff. Like we go around and do tours and talk about all this. We've got a couple like online courses we're doing. We've got like this Eat Like a Fighter program where I take guys through, and it's a pretty brutally honest nutrition course where it's like, I don't give a crap if you lose weight or not. I need you to understand that we don't know a lot about nutrition, and that when we do meal plans, it's a very like inexact science, and that if you want to get results with this, you need to learn these other things like how to mentally prepare for each week to achieve your goals and set very clear goals and know how to adjust. And then we do a course that we're coming out with, the Prep Like a Fighter, where we talk about everything that we went over and how that can change in between different fighters, and okay, what do you look for in their assessments to know what to change. So we're doing a lot of that, but there's a lot of great research out there. Like I said earlier, I'm kind of spoiled because what I'm doing now, there's so many other great people around me that I can suck all their knowledge, whereas like poor guys, like imagine the dudes 20, 30 years ago trying to do this. Like no wonder they've got cooked kidneys and whatnot now.
Yeah.
I've got one more question. Sorry, I keep thinking of more. Sorry. Like when you're writing meal plans and stuff like that, are you always trying to favor, really calorie dense foods? Like are you favoring foods that, like, I guess I've got like a high micro nutrition value. Like I see some dietitians out there writing and putting stuff out, and including, I can't give an example, but what I would deem not necessarily very healthy, but because it fits in with their calorie goal for the day. Like say some dietitians might write, cheeseburger and chips, but over the course of the day, you still don't go over a certain amount of calories. It's still not necessarily a great food choice, Like I guess, do you know what I'm going with that?
Yeah. I think it's like that if it fits your macros type thing.
That type of stuff.
I'm not really, like I said earlier, I'm not a fan of like really working off macros and calories. My focus is really on diet quality, because I think you're putting in your body, like I said, when I went through university and I did all this, my whole focus was to go to med school. I did like all these extra classes, I think. And that, in hindsight, gave me a very unique perspective, because like I've done so much histology and pathology and, pretty high level anatomy and biochemistry and physiology and things like that. So to me, when you're putting food in your body, like I'm just seeing numbers and seeing how this comes in with these equations. And like when you're eating like all those, like don't get me wrong, you can have them every now and then, like the cereals and takeouts and all that. But I just think like, I don't necessarily, maybe it's me, I just don't know, like what's all the preservatives and what's all the artificial, what's going on in that? Maybe I just haven't learnt the pathways and I just don't know what happens with them. And they do go to your liver and they come out and they're fine. But I don't know, as far as I'm concerned, that we know with complete certainty that it's not going to do any harm. So for me, I always just preach diet quality, like 90% of the time, good, clean foods, like low processed foods, minimally processed foods, as minimal refined sugar. Like have sugar. Sugar is useful for you, but not refined sugar that's added into foods. Like get it through natural sources. Lots of protein, whether you want to get that from plant proteins or you want to get it from animal proteins, who cares? Just make sure it's quality protein. You're getting that regularly throughout the day. Make sure fat, you can go into so much detail. Omega-3, 6s, 9s. You can do all this type of stuff. Is it processed fat? Is it unprocessed fat? Almonds, avocados, salmon, whitefish, things like that. It's very different from deep fried cheeseburgers and chips and things like, so it's really, and that's what I do with these guys. Like we focus on it and we say, and we like realistically, okay, you're going to have times where you crave these foods and whatever, but have them, but let's 90% of the time, let's keep it like that. And it's really good when you work with athletes, because I think if you are, even if you're doing that, if it fits your macros system and you're kind of getting all your calories from takeout and cereals and all this stuff, you may not be getting all the nutrients and the micronutrients and the vitamins and minerals. And like I was saying earlier, all of them have a role in this system. And eventually, if you keep doing that and you meet your calories every day by eating 4 Krispy Kremes and a can of Coke, you're going to run out of something and you're going to pay the price from it. Maybe like you could probably be super jacked and super rich and have and super ripped and have a good body composition, but you're going to pay the price on it because you're not getting the vitamin Bs that you need, or you're not getting this mineral, or like your selenium's down, or whatever it is. So diet quality, like diet can be as simple or complex as you want it to be. They're kind of like the rules I preach to my guys, and 90% of the time.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Anything else in your book there you have? No? Anything else? All good?
No, mate, that's pretty much everything from me. Man, that was so
awesome.
informative.
Yeah,
I took so much from that.
Thanks very much for coming on.
Jordi,
appreciate
Jordi,
it.
thanks very much. I really appreciate it.
Anytime.
Where do the guys find you if they want to hit you up? And
so socials, Instagram, _Fight Dietitian is probably where we're most active, and then Facebook, the Fight Dietitian. I only just got Twitter a couple weeks ago.
Oh.
The Twitterverse is something else. I am not used to Twitter, but it's Fight Dietitian @ Fight Dietitian on Twitter. The website is www.thefightdietitian.com. If you want to get in contact, send an email to info@thefightdietitian.com and someone will get back to you.
Awesome. Thanks very much, mate. I'd shake your hand while we
Thanks
call it a minute.
Yeah,
Maybe we'll do a quick elbow
give it
shake.
a fist pump over the air.
Cheers, buddy.
Done.
See you
Thanks,
later,
guys.
lads.
See ya.
Thanks. Bye-bye.